Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lab. In this lab, we're going to set up our EC2 instance to basically work with all the other elements of AWS that we created in the last lab. So you'll need to log into the AWS console. Okay, so I've logged into the AWS console. I'm going to go over to EC2 and I'm going to go ahead and hit launch instance. And we're going to create a instance using the Amazon Linux AMI, and I'm going to use my T2 micro. Go ahead and hit next. Now the very first thing you need to do is assign the S3 role to it. Do not forget to do this because otherwise the lab won't work. Once you've done that, you can go down here and add a bootstrap script. Now we have included this bootstrap script as part of the resources section, and I'll just quickly run through what it does. Okay, so here is our bash script, and this bash script is entirely optional. If you're a Linux sysadmin, you know your way around Linux, you know how to make changes to your HTTPD conf files and to enable things like URL rewrites, for example, then you probably just want to use this bash script. If you're a complete newbie to AWS and to Linux itself, then it's probably best to just follow me in the console and type it out manually, just so you get the hang of it, and it's a great way to learn. So I'll just explain what this bash script actually does. So we've got our shebang and then the path to our interpreter. And this basically means that anything below this will be executed at root level when the EC2 instance boots up. So the first thing we do is we run a yum update. So we apply all our security patches. We're then going to go ahead and install HTTPD, which is Apache. We're going to install PHP, PHP MySQL, and then a little application called Stress, which allows us to simulate stress tests on our CPU, which we'll use later. We then change our directory over to the Apache configuration directory, and then what we're doing is we're just making a backup of our configuration file. We're then deleting the original configuration file, and we're getting a new configuration file. Now this new configuration file basically enables URL rewrites, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail later on. Now I'm getting this from a Cloud Guru bucket that I've set up. If you don't use the bash scripts, we're actually going to go in and run nano on our HTTPD conf file, and we're going to go in and enable URL rewrites manually. So once we've got that file, we're then changing our directory over to var www.html, and we're creating a new file called healthy.html, and in there it's just going to say the word healthy. And now we would do this for our elastic load balancers. So in order for it to pass its health check, I'm going to do this in nano in the real world, but in the bash script I'm just echoing it out, and then that will automatically create the file. Then going to go and get WordPress. We're going to untar WordPress and install it. It's not going to install to the var www.html directory. It's going to install to a directory above that called or below that called WordPress. So what I then do is I just move the contents of that directory back to the var www.html. I then delete that old directory and I delete the WordPress tar. And then we're just going to make two configuration changes to our WordPress content directory. And we're just going to change the permissions on it so that we can write files to WordPress content. And then I'm going to start the HTTPD service, the Apache service, and we're going to make sure that the Apache service will turn on automatically in case our EC2 instance reboots. So that bash script will save you a fair bit of time. You won't have to go in and do it manually. However, it can be fun to do it manually. So it's entirely up to you as to whether or not you want to use that bash script, or you can just follow on with me in the console. I'm not going to use it. I'm just going to type it out manually. So go ahead and hit next. We'll just use our standard 8 gigs of storage. Name, I'm just going to call this my WordPress web server. And going to go ahead and hit next. I'm going to put this in my existing security group, which is my web DMZ, and go ahead and hit review and launch. And I'm going to launch my instance, and I'm going to hit launch. So there we go. We've launched our instance. We'll go in and view our instances now. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm just going to pause the video and wait for this to come up live. And then I'm going to get the IP address and I'm going to SSH in. So as soon as you got your public IP address, SSH into the instance and we can move on. Okay, so my EC2 instance is now live and we've got my public IP address. So I'm going to copy this into my clipboard. I'm going to go over to my terminal window and I'm just going to type in SSH EC2-user at the IP address, then -i, and then the name of my key. Go ahead and hit enter, and I'm just going to say yes, And there we go. So I'm going to raise my privileges to root, and I'm going to clear the screen. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to do is run a yum update, and we're going to apply all our security patches. We're then going to install Apache, PHP, PHP MySQL, and a application called Stress. So just wait for this to finish updating. Shouldn't be very long. Okay, now that has finished. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to run yum install httpd php MySQL and Stress. You go ahead and do yes. And so that is now installing. So that's installed everything. The next thing we're going to do is go over and we're going to configure Apache to use URL rewrites. And I'll explain why we do that in a second. So the first thing we need to do is go to our etc, our httpd conf directory. And if we just have a look in here, we've got our Apache configuration file. So I'm just going to make a copy of that. I'm going to say copy httpd.conf, and I'm going to call it httpd-conf backup, and then .conf. So I've created a copy. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to nano this httpd.conf, and this is where it gets a bit different to the Bootstrap scripts, because you can't do this in the Bootstrap script. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down, and what we're looking for is we want to allow URL rewrites. And the reason we want to do that is we want people, like our large image files, to be distributed using CloudFront and not using our EC2 instance. So whenever somebody browses to our website, they will be getting our media files from CloudFront, and that will basically just speed everything up. So you can see here, I found the document root /var/www/html. If you continue just scrolling down a little bit, eventually you're going to see this allow override controls directive. And in here, it says allow override none. And what we want to do is we want to change this to all. So just go ahead and hit all, and then hit Control X and hit yes. And we're going to save it and hit enter. And so what we've just done now is we've turned on URL rewrites for Apache. So we are able to rewrite our URL so that when a user browsers to our WordPress site, they're not going to browse to any image assets that are on that EC2 instance. They're actually going to browse to the image assets that are going to be served out of CloudFront. And if that's not making a lot of sense to you just yet, well, wait, I'll show you how it all works. So now that we've done that, we can go over to our var www.html directory. And in here, we're going to create our healthy.html file. So healthy.html. And I'm just going to write healthy. And this is what our Elastic Load Balancer is going to run its health checks against. So we've created that. If I type in ls, you can see that it says healthy. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install WordPress. So we can do this by typing wget https // and then it's wordpress.org / and then it's latest.tar.gz. And that will download the latest version of WordPress to our HTML directory. Then if you just type in ls, you can see it in here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to untar it. So untar or tar -xzf, and then it is called latest.tar.gz. Go ahead and unzip that. And now you can see it's created a directory called WordPress. The problem is I don't want a directory called WordPress. I want the contents of the files that are in that WordPress directory to be in our HTML directory, because that's our root level directory for Apache. So what I need to do now is I need to just type in copy -r, which is recursive, WordPress, and then / and then the star. And then I'm just basically going to copy it to our var www.html directory and hit enter. And so now if I type in ls, you can see all the contents of the WordPress directory is now within our root directory for Apache. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove WordPress, just going to remove that directory, WordPress. And then I'm also going to remove the tar file that we just downloaded to save some space. Okay, so now we've got our WordPress installation files all in our HTML directory. Just going to clear the screen. just to keep it simple. And now we're just going to, if you actually do have a look, you can see the WP content directory is there. We need to make some permission changes so that we can upload media assets to this. So I'm going to chmod -r for recursive. I'm going to change the permissions to 755. I'm going to do content. And so that's changed it there. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do chown recursive, and then it's apache.apache, and then wp-content. And so this will allow us to be able to upload media files to our WordPress installation. Now, the very last thing we need to do is start the HTTPD service. So we go service HTTPD start, and then I'm just going to run a check config. This basically means that Apache will start in case our EC2 instance reboots. And so that is it. We are basically ready to go. So I'm going to clear the screen now. Okay, guys, so if you did run the Bootstrap script, we're up to the point now where it would have finished. So you would not have to have done any of those commands. I just thought I'd walk you through it and show you exactly what we're doing in the console. But from now on in, you have to copy exactly as I do. We're going to go over to our browser. Okay, so we're in our browser, and I want you to cut and paste your public IP address. And actually, if you are using your root domain name, if you go over to your load balancer and just have a look down here under instances. So right now there are no instances registered to this load balancer. So why don't we go in there and now add our WordPress web server. So we go ahead and hit save. And so this is out of service. I'm just going to pause the video for 30 seconds, and this should hopefully come into service within 30 seconds. Okay, so it's been 30 seconds. If I just go up here and hit refresh, we can see now that it's changed from out of service to in service. And what I can actually do is I can either enter in my domain name up here or the IP address. So I'm actually just going to enter in aforce.guru. And if it's all working, there we go. We can see it's the WordPress installation page. So already my DNS is connecting up to my Elastic Load Balancer, which is going down to my WordPress instance, which has Apache installed on it, and my security group is open to port 80. So it's all working. Me as a client can directly communicate with this EC2 server. So what do we need to do now? Well, we basically need to go in and install WordPress. So we'll go ahead and hit let's go. So the database name, the username, the password, the database host, we need to enter all this in. So the first thing I'm going to do is go back over to RDS, and I'm going to go get my endpoint. So we go over here, go to our DB instances. This should hopefully have been provisioned for you by now. And if you just click on it, you can see that your endpoints is available here. So we cut and paste that into our clipboard. Now, if you remember, I called everything a Cloud Guru, just to make things easier for me. So I'm going to go ahead, and my database name I'm going to call a Cloud Guru. Username is a Cloud Guru. My password is a Cloud Guru, and then my database host is just my endpoint, and it's optional as to whether or not you want to leave the port settings there, 3306 or not. I'm just going to leave it in there. You can go ahead and hit submit, and with any luck, we won't have any issues. So right now it's saying that it can't write the WP config file. So that's fine. What we're going to do is just cut and paste this into our clipboard. We'll go back across to our terminal window. Make sure you're in the HTML directory. We're going to go nano wp-config.php. So we're going to create the file. We're just going to cut and paste the settings that was in there. Hit Control X. We're going to exit and save. And then if we come back to our browser, we'll go run the install. And if everything works, you'll see this screen. So that just means that it can definitely connect to our RDS backend instance. It's not having any kind of problems. So the site title, I'm going to call it A Cloud Guru. The username, very original, A Cloud Guru. Password, A Cloud Guru. And then I'm going to confirm use of weak password. And my email, I'm just going to do my example at email.com. And I'm going to go ahead and hit install WordPress. And with any luck, we won't have any errors. It can take a couple of seconds, but there we go. So we've now installed WordPress, and we can log in to WordPress. So the password was A Cloud Guru and then A Cloud Guru. So I've just logged into WordPress. And now if we go over to posts and we click on post, we'll see the default Hello World post. I'm going to change this to say Hello Cloud Gurus. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit update. And so if I actually go over and go to aforce.guru, we can see already that it's live on the system and it's updated to Hello Cloud Gurus. So the next thing we want to do is start making this a bit more fault tolerant. So if we go over to the command line and we type in AWS S3LS, we should be able to see our buckets, and we've got the WordPress Code 16 A Cloud Guru bucket and the WordPress Media 16 A Cloud Guru bucket. Now, the first thing I want to start doing is I want to copy the code that's in my HTML directory, so all of this content, over to WordPress Code 16 A Cloud Guru. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in AWS S3 and then it's copy, and then I'm going to use the recursive command. So recursive, so this is just saying move all the files in this in this path, and I'm going to copy from the var www html, and I'm going to do it to S3, and then it's called WordPress Code 16 A Cloud Guru, and I'm going to hit enter. And so what this is now doing is it's uploading my code from my from the var www directory over to S3. It can take a little bit of time, but it's not too long. If we actually just clear the screen now, and if I type in AWS S3 LS, and then it was WordPress Code 16 A Cloud Guru, it's a very long bucket name, but I can actually see now that those files are within my bucket. So I've basically backed up the entire contents of this web server to my bucket. And if I go back a directory, I can be a bit cheeky here, and I can go rm -rf, and I can delete the HTML directory. So I've just deleted the entire HTML directory. We no longer have a HTML directory, and I can go and make this HTML directory. And then if I go ls, go into HTML, you see that there's no files here. If I clear the screen, and if I just refresh this page, we're going to get absolutely nothing at all. And the reason for that is because it's an empty directory now. So essentially what we've done is we've simulated a failure of our EC2 instance. So how do we get the code back? Well, let's go over back to our terminal window. Okay, so I'm back in my terminal window, and what we want to now do is download the code from our S3 bucket. So we do AWS S3 and then copy, and then we want to do this recursively, and we want to copy the entire, or recursive rather, and we want to copy the entire S3 bucket. So it was WordPress Code 16 A Cloud Guru, and we want to do this to our var www.html directory. And then hit enter, and so now we're downloading the code from our S3 bucket back to our web server. And now that that's done, if we just go over to our web browser and just refresh the screen, you'll see that the website has come back. So now the very next thing we want to do is just go back, and we just want to quickly just change the permissions again. So we want to chmod -r, because we just deleted everything that we did. So it's 755 for the WordPress content directory. And this is basically where all our content will go when we upload things like media assets to it. And then we want to chown, and then again recursively apache.apache, and we want to do it to the WP content directory. So what we've just done is we've simulated losing our web server and then downloading a copy of our code from S3 back to our web server. Okay, so we're going to end the lab here, but what we've done in this lab is we've set up our EC2 instance, we've installed WordPress on it, and we've uploaded our code to S3. We've then simulated a failover by deleting our root level directory for Apache, and then we have recreated that root level directory, and then we've copied our code back down from S3. So in the next lab, we're going to look at how we can start automating all of this. So if you've got the time, please join me in the next lab. Thank you.